Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Global Ask a VC series. And we're happy to have you here today. So we are going to be proceeding with a Q&A and a chat with our guest speaker, who is Jonathan Chi, who is joining us from Palo Alto. Although he has spent a fair amount of time in China, but he is now really focusing a lot more on the US. So we're going to hear more about his career background and his involvement with tech innovation. He's had a stellar career in many, many places. I'll run you through his background here. He's now a global partner at Meridien Capital Asia, based in Palo Alto. 20 years experience in Silicon Valley, tech leadership roles, several firms. Also has worked in venture capital, focusing a lot on Asia tech. And he worked at Sky9, at Foshan, at Hony Capital, at Tencent, co-founder, single family office. He has a bachelor in computer science from Peking University. He pursued PhD studies in artificial intelligence at USC. He holds multiple tech patents, which I never knew until I did this research for the show with Jonathan today. So just a little bit about myself and this series. We're happy to say that Invest Hong Kong has been sponsoring this series, which we started in 2020 during the beginning of COVID. And we've been going strong since then with about 75 shows with venture capitalists from around the world. You can see all of those shows on our YouTube channel, Silicon Global Online. We also do a number of events in New York, in Silicon Valley, in LA, and we've done a fair number of them in Hong Kong as well, and many other tech hubs and overseas. But lately, we've been doing a little bit more ourselves in the US, New York and Silicon Valley and LA. So we will be sharing some event news in a moment. So if you haven't joined us before, we have our newsletter, we have books, we have our Circle membership. There's my 4 books. I'm working on the 5th one right now. Stay tuned. There's Jonathan's background again, as a refresher for all of you. So I am going to stop the share so Jonathan and I can talk for a little bit about his background and his view on technology innovation trends and what he's working on lately. And then we're going to open it up to some Q&A with our online audience. All right, well, thank you again for joining us. So let's see. Jonathan, where would you like to start? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So you guys
Yeah,
can hear
because
me, right?
yeah, it's very
Yeah.
fascinating because you've worked in so many different facets of technology, from working in these technology companies as a CTO to also working in these number of venture capital firms. So you have a really good perspective on cross-border issues. And that's why I would
Yes.
like you to tell us a little bit more about your perspective and your background and how you see things today. So I'll let you talk for a few minutes then.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So I guess first I have to thank Rebecca and a lot of congratulations on Silicon Dragon. I think I got involved probably 10 years ago. I think I joined one of those panel sessions. I guess either in Hong Kong or Shanghai. I still remember one of the Lightspeed James Lightspeed person. James me was there in the same panel, right? And then later I joined quite a few other sessions. So I enjoy all the, talks and also we both of us, travel back and forth around the globe.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we actually did all these connections and the links between, Asia and the US, Silicon Valley and Hong Kong or Shanghai. It's a quite a journey, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And yeah, and a lot of things changed, I guess, across the past 10 years. Um, uh, a little more on my background again, so for people to probably better understand my views. As Rebecca just showed, I have my whole career actually got um, um, a big range. So it went across. I think I first started in academia. So I not just patents. I actually had a lot of papers, research papers
Oh,
in
okay.
yeah. If you Google my name, you should see my research papers in multi-agent. I'm going to talk a little about multi-agent later today, but that turned out to be a very hot area today in artificial intelligence. But I studied in USC, University of Southern California, uh, in 1990s in my PhD program. Yeah, so I got very involved in academia. But later I joined. So I think one of the reasons I didn't continue with my academic pursuits was back then AI was a um, very what do you call it? Not really a hot area to start with back then. So you cannot really find any jobs back then. So I ended up joining I found a job after my PhD studies, and I joined Cisco as my first job. So I relocated from Los Angeles to Bay Area to Silicon Valley, and then my second phase of my career, which is industry, started back then. So I spent almost 15 years in this industry. So what I call it internet infrastructure industry. So which is connected to the internet, but a little bit it a bit late, a little bit like foundation models today, which is kind of an infrastructure for the whole AI industry, right? So it's not back then it was not internet itself, but it lay out all the infrastructure. So Cisco was a big name back then. If you look at um, the stock of Cisco, that was the kind of the prime time for Cisco. I joined so right after I joined, Cisco's stocks probably went up 5 times ish. Yeah, that was called internet bubble. So we experienced the whole dot-com bubble back then. And so my whole industry experience or career actually went through a very interesting or several very interesting cycles. And then yeah, um, then I started to get involved in today we call it cloud business, right? So it started back in 2008 when AWS started. So I joined Tencent in 2010, which turned out to be a top cloud company. Well, they have a very good social platform, right? Probably everybody knows, but they also have a very big cloud computing operations in Asia. And I was one of their earliest, you know, um, technologists in Tencent. So I relocated from Silicon Valley to Hong Kong to lead that effort in Tencent. Well, I was leading one of the functions called SDN, software defined networking back then. And back then I got a lot of patents and again tech research papers. And so I was still on the industry side. Then right after that I switched to venture capital. So I think I was lucky that since after all this, academia and industry experiences, when I switched to the investment side, I can see a lot of, I have a little bit different views than a lot of investors back then in Asia. Because I joined a firm in Hong Kong called Decent Capital, right? The name is actually connected to Tencent. So you can see that so it should be pronounced as Descent in a sense. Yeah. But most people call it decent capital. So it was founded by the founder of Tencent. So it's a single family office, but we operate it like as an angel fund. So we invest in today probably hundreds of startups, mostly in Asia, but some in the US too. So that was my start in this industry. Then I went through quite a few different VC firms later, and I'm mostly focused in tech area. And because in Asia we have different focuses, right? Some investors focusing more in Asia. I mean in tech. Some Asian investor focus more in consumer. So it's quite a split in Asia and in Asian investors. But I personally focus more on the tech and also more on the deep tech side because of my background. So
Yeah.
yeah, after all these years, so basically I joined this current firm called Meridien, which is a fund based in Singapore. We started in Singapore in 2008, and we are now managing our AUM of 1.5 billion US dollars. We have 10 funds altogether. We have launched 10 funds so far, seven Asia funds and three global funds. So Asia funds are bigger, so we deploy in bigger sizes in Asia, but we're focused a little more in earlier stages of startups in other locations, including US.
So
Yeah, and as
this is
yes, go
Meridian
ahead.
Capital Asia you're talking about now with the 10
Yeah,
funds and seven of them in Asia and three of them global,
yes,
right? Okay.
yes.
Well, I think
So
it's amazing that you're starting out in your career. You started out with the hottest company of its time, Cisco, back then during the dot-com.
yeah,
It was like NVIDIA is today, right?
I
And
would say, to be honest, I would say Cisco back then was like NVIDIA plus OpenAI.
oh, really?
Because it's a whole what we call it infrastructure, kind of the stack, the in tech stack. It because Cisco was making its own chips. So
Uh-huh.
back then there was no NVIDIA or even Broadcom, right? So Cisco was making all his own semiconductor, and also it lay out the whole what we call foundation models. So it is what foundation model is to AI. You know, when Cisco doing it, it's really the all they produce manufacturing all the routers and all the infrastructure for internet companies. So like
Sure.
companies like Google, Yahoo, or Tencent, they have to purchase Cisco's gear. And Huawei actually was one of the companies trying to study a lot of technology from Cisco back then. So
Right.
that's the same kind of same same route
All
for
right. So
for
you were
for
there
for for
when
them.
John Chambers was in charge?
Exactly. Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Yes.
we
Yes.
had John
Yeah. Yeah.
Chambers on this show once.
Wow. Wow. Congrats.
Uh-huh. And yeah. And all right, so great. We have several more people who have joined in, and I appreciate that that you're waiting for me to call on you or waiting to get a question in. But let me keep asking Jonathan. I'm always very curious about things, so let me ask away. Jonathan, tell me about your 10-cent days. What was that like?
Okay. 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 Yeah. So I joined Tencent as one of their earliest technologists in the cloud business, like I mentioned. That was back in kind of early days that was back in 2010. So if I remember correctly, Amazon started AWS roughly around 2008-ish. So in Asia, it was a little bit later than in the US. So back then there was only two companies in Asia, investing in cloud computing business. One is Tencent, one is Alibaba. So, but today they both of them became very big,
Mhm.
and again, like I mentioned, I've been focusing this what we call internet infrastructure business, right? Even starting from Cisco, but cloud computing later on become also infrastructure, right? But it was kind of the enabling technology so that a lot of more uh, uh, you know mobile internet companies can start to, be created because of, cloud, right? Because in
Mhm.
before that, a lot of companies they need to manage their own infrastructure, right? They have to buy Cisco gears and then set up their own data centers. But after that, and especially when iPhone after iPhone came out, so if you look at the timeline, it almost got aligned. When iPhone came out, a lot of such companies actually also got created. They created their own applications based on iOS, right? Based on iPhone or Android platforms. But then they also need to set up their data center infrastructures, right? But
Mhm.
before it would take them much longer, right?
Mhm.
Much more efforts to do that. But with
Mhm.
cloud computing, operations, they can offload a lot of those work to people like AWS and later maybe Google Cloud, Azure from Microsoft. Well, in Asia, it's mostly Alibaba and Tencent back then. But later, Huawei also caught up. That was much later. So back in 2010, I think there was a book about I mentioned Tencent, probably by Reid Hoffman. He mentioned something about Tencent, talking about the years in 2010, but he mostly mentioned WeChat. But because WeChat was also created back in 2010, that turned out to be one of the major, social platform, right, in Asia
Oh,
with
sure.
billions of users. But at the same time, in the same year, I joined a different team in Tencent, which is cloud, which turned out to be also very important, but a little bit hidden because WeChat was also built upon the cloud operations. So one of the reasons WeChat can win their battle in China or in Asia in general because we have very good infrastructure. Because there were a lot of other competitors back then, competing with WeChat. Most of them, actually, one of them from Xiaomi. I don't know how many people. So Xiaomi today was one of the major cell phone vendors, right? But Xiaomi actually did also a similar app way before WeChat started.
Really?
And yes, yes. So, but if you look back, I mean, if Xiaomi can succeed in that game, then Xiaomi today will be much bigger. Because if you look at WeChat's, revenue every year is much bigger than Xiaomi's cell phone business and their today EV electric vehicle business combined, right? If you look at the capital, market cap, it's also totally different. So,
Yeah.
but Xiaomi almost won that game. But back then they didn't study their cloud business yet. So all their operations still based on their traditional data center operations. So when the user base grew, they started to see a lot of crashes and the app is called Liao. It's like a Mi, right? And it's like MeChat. It's very similar to WeChat. It's called MeChat. So, but and which has actually much bigger user base than WeChat back then. But they started to crash I think when they crossed a million users, if I remember correctly, only 1 billion US users, and because their infrastructure is less stable, and when they started to try to fix that, WeChat surpassed their growth. So that's very important back then. If you look back, so
Yeah,
cloud
yeah,
computing actually
that's
yes.
it is very interesting. Also, I'm just thinking about how Xiaomi has gotten into electric cars in China, and it's something that Apple tried to do, but it didn't
Yeah,
master.
Apple didn't do it because I think I talked to a lot of Apple people because at the end Apple thinks very small business, right? If you add up all the car companies, business, it's probably only a very small fraction of Apple's, right? But to Xiaomi, it's big because Xiaomi is not that a big company. But if you look at Tencent's revenue, it's huge. It's much bigger. And Tencent revenue is actually if you look back, it's mostly coming from WeChat. Even WeChat by itself is only a social platform, right? But most of Tencent's gaming revenue actually got distributed on WeChat. So that's why it's a very important, it's a very good commercialization, approach. And so it's again it's much bigger than Xiaomi's business.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So why did you take the leap then into VC? You basically took the leap into VC, working at this angel fund, really created by the co-founder of Tencent. So why did you do that? And what were you doing then? What kind of deals were you doing? And what did you learn from the experience?
Yes. So I was leading the I guess one of the functions of cloud computing inside Tencent back then, right? So if you look at my background, I have academia, I have industry, I have
Yeah.
cross border. I relocated from Silicon Valley to Hong Kong to lead a team, and at the same time, I got to know this guy who quit Tencent several years ago, but he happened to be one of the co-founders of Tencent. Well,
Hmm.
even back then, he was already a billionaire for sure. I think back then Tencent was already the biggest internet company in China, and today it is still the biggest company biggest internet company in China. I think at peak time, Tencent's market cap reached 1 trillion briefly, if I remember correctly, very close to 1 trillion US dollars.
Yeah.
But anyway, back then it was already very big, right? So this guy, the name was Jason. So Jason left Tencent and started his own, single family office. But he wanted to invest very heavily into early startups in China because his vision is, in China it will experience probably the same curve as in Silicon Valley. That was back around 2010, right ish. So his vision was, and that happened to be, aligned with iPhone's launch and the mobile internet just started to form in Asia. So and he was looking for a person who can invest together with him, basically a managing director for him, and he set a few criteria. So number one, this person has to become from Tencent, number one, and has
Yeah.
to study and work in the US, and had to be technology background, R&D R&D background and such. Yeah, and I happened that I fit into that profile, and I got to know him, and we talked, and he liked a lot about my background, after some time, eventually I joined him. So I back then I actually knew very little about venture capital because I came, like I mentioned, I came from academia and industry background, right? I managed a team inside Tencent for R&D in cloud computing business. But when I joined that firm, then I immediately realized that all my past experience can work in here. But I also went through our period that because whenever I talk to a company or startup, I started thinking very technical, uh, thinking, and I would start to think, okay, they 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 won't be able to make it. If you look too much in details, then you will start to think, okay, this startup will never work. Even today, a lot of investors when they talk to a AI company like GPT related companies or large language model companies, when they start, or robotics, what do we call embodied AI companies, right? And a lot of them actually, if you look too much into details and if you understand too much into technology, you will get you will get your cold feet. You will start to think, okay, they will never make it. So I went through that period also. So that, yeah, during the first few years of my career in venture capital, I I was so I really I cannot pull the trigger. Yeah, it was very interesting when I look back.
Yeah.
But after that, I started to realize that's why it's called venture capital. You really need to take the venture. Yeah, so it's a lot of risks, a lot of uncertainties. It's all uncharted lands, and if you look too much into details, you would never be able to pull the trigger. But how do you know but first you still need to understand the details, right? You cannot just look away from the details. You need to understand all the details. You need to do all your judgments, and then after that you need to jump out of it, right? You need to close the book and just um, just think. So what is the essence of this startup, and what can the founders achieve? and you have to give them maybe at least a few years, right? I mean, without they probably I mean it's all explanation, right, for them to experiment.
Right.
So, but they have to try it. They have to try it with rapid iterations, and they have to, and they will fail. But if they can fail cheap, fail fast, right? Then that's still a good deal. So yeah, and like I mentioned, I eventually, after only maybe 3 4 years, I eventually got it. So but my technology background really still helps me a lot. Like today, if we look at all the AI deals, I mean, because a lot of my peer investors, they will still um um got confused because a lot of AI companies. I guess one of the biggest challenges today is if you talk to any startup, they will claim they are AI company. Okay, that's a big challenge because like I mentioned that today one of our major focus is AI, right? But then if you look at now you started to talk to all the entrepreneurs, uh, I mean no matter in Silicon Valley or in Asia, you found okay 99% of them are AI companies. Then
Yeah.
then you really need to ask a question: what is really AI, right? When 99% of startups claim they're AI companies, then that means it's not true, right? That cannot be true. Then a lot of them, actually a big portion of them, are not really AI companies, or what we call not AI native companies. They're
Right.
mostly, yeah, a lot of them are just traditional, technology or just internet companies, right?
So of the Chinese tech titans, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Xiaomi, that group of companies of ByteDance, would you say any of those are AI companies? I know they're all in AI, but would you call them AI companies?
Yeah, I think it's hard to label the giants today.
Yeah.
But if you look at startup, it's a little bit easier because tech giants, they need to do everything, right? They have to be an internet company, they have to be a cloud company, they have to be an AI company, they have to be even semiconductor companies, right?
Yeah.
If you look at AWS, Amazon, even Alibaba, they all be doing their own semiconductor, their own chips, right? So it's hard to label a giant. But if you look at a startup, then they can only do one thing to start with, right? They are not giants, right? If they start doing 100 things, you know, at one time, I mean, they will for sure fail. If they just do one thing, then you have to understand: is this real AI or is this just internet? That's a big call, right? I mean, and I end up I start realize it really need a lot of technology, you know, um, judgment from it because you really need to look at their R&D, right? A lot of them, sometimes it's easier because they don't really have their own AI expertise at all. It's a bit like back in the internet time. If you have a brick and mortar store, they start to come up with a website. Then they started to call themselves our internet company.
Yeah.
It's very easy to tell, right?
Right.
You just look at their website. Okay, that's just a website. They don't have any core technology, and
Yeah.
they still sell things mostly in their offline stores, sometimes on their website. It's not an internet company. It's still a traditional retail company.
Right.
Today we saw the same thing. A lot of companies are just an internet company, which is same as 20 years ago. The team is only good in come up with a mobile app or a website, and then they utilize AI. Just like back then, a brick and mortar company utilized internet. It's very
Mhm.
similar. Then they call themselves AI companies today, right? So, but they don't really have. I guess number one, how do they utilize their customer data? That's a big question mark for these so-called AI companies, right?
Mm.
Because they started to come up. They use ChatGPT, right? They utilize ChatGPT, right? It's an internet company, but they try to call ChatGPT APIs to generate some feedback or functions for their end users, and then started call themselves AI companies. But whenever they have a lot of custom data, private data, proprietary data, they don't know how to use those. So they cannot form what we call a data flywheel.
I
So this is
see.
a big, yeah, this is a big differences between AI company and the internet company. but the line is very thin, right? I mean, it's very hidden if you don't look at it very carefully, and if you don't look at it from a technology or R&D point of view, it's very easy to miss it.
Hmm. So you
Yeah.
took your VC lessons from Tencent. You're working with the Tencent co-founder on this angel fund, and you
Yes.
got over your risk aversion. And so then,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, that's very important.
yeah, and so then you
I call it venture. So it's more risk taking instead of risk, management.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see where that must have been tricky to get over that, but I can understand.
Yes.
But then you were very successful as a VC for many years for Honey Capital,
Thank you.
Foshan, and
Mhm.
Sky9. Um,
Mhm.
and just give us a few highlights from that time of your career.
Yeah. I think we started in a time that, like I mentioned, the mobile internet started, especially in Asia. And we went through that was a big time for sharing economy. So but we did see a lot of failures in China. So we missed Didi
You mean
back
like
then.
the
So
like the bike sharing thing was a total fiasco, right?
yeah, back sharing, even before back sharing, a lot of Um, so in Asia, they call it O2O, right? Offline to online. I guess which is the less popular term in Silicon Valley, but in the US, but in China, it was so popular, which pretty much means sharing economy in a sense. But basically, people are doing all kinds of sharing, right? Like they trying to on internet trying to find all different kind of things like hairstylists, right? Similar to Airbnb, similar to we invest in a company we who they sell houses online. It's not like Redfin. With Redfin or Zillow, they just help you find maybe an agent online, right? But in Asia, they really trying to sell the house online. It's a e-commerce for real estate. You
I
can really make a transaction online.
I see.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, which turned out to be not that successful, as you can imagine. But they got listed in the US. But after the real estate market crashed, the stock market wasn't. But the good things we exited at the right time
What was the name of the
before
company?
before the crashing. It's called FDD. I think it's
Okay.
yeah. So that was very interesting model. So but unfortunately, that was kind of one of the I guess a very biggest, a very probably one of the most important model back then in the mobile internet era in China, and a lot of social media companies back then, and a lot of also online game companies,
Did you say
fintech.
you missed DD? You missed DD, meaning you didn't invest in them, or you?
Yeah,
I mean, because
we did
DD
not.
was
We
an
did
up and
not.
down story.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's hard to say we missed them because even we invest in them, probably we still cannot make an exit yet.
Oh,
So it's
you did invest
no
in
no
them.
we did not invest. But what
Oh,
I'm saying, even if we invested, we probably still cannot make a return yet.
oh yeah,
Yeah, because they haven't really got listed. But anyway, that's a different story. But
I know.
anyway, yeah. So so then I got involved in a lot of AI companies. Actually, a lot of them are today what we call image processing or autonomous driving companies because we call it AI 1.0, right? So that was before large language model. So that's kind of the what we call it deep learning phase of AI. So a lot of those companies are vision processing related based on neural nets, right? Though back then there was no, large language model. So it's mostly not about language. So that
Mhm.
started roughly around 2015-ish. Yeah. So So good things we got involved in, but I went through a few different, investing firms. So my deals also, sits across different firms. So that make it a little bit complicated to talk about. But in the end, we got involved in autonomous driving companies such as uh, actually two of them were listed. One of them we missed. They both were listed in the US. Well, the first one is called Pony. The second one was called We Ride.
Yeah, I just wrote about both of them. They just listed
Yeah.
at the end of 2024.
Yes. Yes. And
So
quite a few of them.
Baidu's very
Yeah.
big in AI self-driving as well with this Apollo project.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes. And all those companies, the two I just mentioned, they both came from a Baidu background.
I
Actually,
see.
both came from Baidu's Silicon Valley team.
I see.
Yeah, I happen to be so if coming back to my personal story, I moved back from Hong Kong after several years in living in Hong Kong back to Silicon Valley,
Hmm.
and I joined a firm called Sky9, right? So which is a Lightspeed spin-off in
Hmm.
China. So
Hmm.
that was happened to be around the time that when AI became more prime time in this industry, and one
Hmm.
of the biggest major direction is autonomous driving. And because I now moved back to Silicon Valley, I started to talk to a lot of one of them. I mean, one of my focus talking to those similar to the Baidu team, who uh, who are in Silicon Valley, right? It's called Baidu Silicon Valley Autonomous Driving Division or something like that, right? And probably at least 10 startups came from that team.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I remember the number, but I forgot all those names. But at least 10 related startups. So very interesting. So it was very good time for deal sourcing. If when we because uh, it happened that if you look at the number, the number of companies in Asia for autonomous driving actually exceeded those in Silicon Valley itself because of the market, right? The market was bigger, and a lot of investments from auto industry itself in
Yeah.
Asia.
And a lot
Yeah,
of them were testing on California roads. At least a dozen
exactly,
of them from
exactly.
China testing on California roads. So I remember interviewing some of them, and now I don't think they're here now, but if they are here, they're lower profile. So
Yeah, they end up making a lot of business by providing the solutions to traditional auto companies, which is a little different from their original business plans,
I
to be
see.
honest. Yeah, they are not operating uh, independently in a sense. Same thing as Waymo, right? So, which is still probably in their roadmap, but today, even after their IPO, they still haven't really gone into that business, which is what we call robo taxis. They are not really operating independently as a taxi, operators, just like Waymo or Uber, right? Like a Uber without drivers. They haven't really been achieving that. But I think that's mostly because of the value chains and ecosystem in Asia, which is a little different than in the US. So they have to provide all that solution instead as as a supply chain. They provide those modules and algorithms and sometimes data to you know auto companies
I
such
see.
as NIO or Xiaomi. Well,
I
Xiaomi did a lot of their own R&D also, but they also uh, you know uh, you know buy a lot of solutions, purchase a lot
okay.
of solutions. Yeah,
Okay.
so
So
it's a
now
little bit
you're
different
back.
today.
Yeah, I get it. Now you're back in Silicon Valley, and that's
Yes,
probably a good spot to be, right? And
yes, yes,
and so
yeah.
you can see what's going on with a bird's eye view of technology innovations, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
Plus you know about China too because of your background. and your experience in investing there. So that's it puts you in a
Hmm.
pretty good spot because, China and US being the two major um, tech leaders in the world today, and this superpower battle that we're seeing going on between the two of them is still playing out with a lot of nuances like the TikTok situation, which we won't get into too much because who knows what's going to happen with that, as we saw today with the tariffs. Who knows what's going to happen? So maybe just wait a bit before we discuss it further. But anyhow, we do have a couple of questions too. There's, they talk about data being the oil, right?
Hmm.
Of the universe, right? Data is it, right? So we have a person on from Canada who was talking about setting up a data center. So as we know, there's a lot of investment going into data centers today. So
Hmm.
is this a good business to get into? Is it how do you even get started in that? That's a question we have from one of the online audience members.
So the question is data center uh, a good business in general, or I mean,
He wants
I
to
guess
build a data center. How should I go about that? I'll mention I don't have deep pockets, he says. But I think you probably
well,
need deep pockets to do that, don't you?
you need you need very deep pocket, and I think by nature data center business is real estate, right? Because you really need land, and you need build buildings,
Yeah,
and you need builders and contractors,
yeah.
and that's the kind of the majority of your competence. So it's very hard. I mean, but it's really a necessity right today, especially for AI. But the tricky thing is, AI is still well, AI is the one who make this a more necessity in a sense. But
Mhm.
AI can also make it less. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think a little bit like what AI has done so far to NVIDIA, to the semiconductor business, right?
right.
So yeah, but data center will be in even bigger challenges in a sense because you cannot pivot very easily, right? But so it's again, if you look at it's a tech stack, right? So AI is like algorithm is on the top. Then you have all those servers, and you have semiconductors. Then you have IDCs, right? So from top down, right? So the more you're on the top, the more you are controlling position in a sense because you're driving a lot of directions. Like on the top, you well today AI you have less applications. A lot of them are still models, what we call large language models, right? And if you have a new language model, then you start to have a lot of new requirement for the semiconductor or for the chips and also for the IDCs. So so that's why most of the lower layers actually got driven from the top layer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call software defined, right? That's one direction I've been working on when I was in Tencent. Actually both in Cisco and Tencent. So I was one of the kind of the earliest technologies in so-called software defined networking (SDN), which turned out later change into something called SDX, basically software defined everything. So now everything is software defined. Even cars are software defined,
I see.
meaning you first have software, then you have then you worry about what the car should look like. But today same thing. So the semiconductor and also the IDC data center configurations need to be all aligned with the software. So which make it a little bit tricky because it's a little difficult for you to pivot because you have all the land, you have all the buildings, you have all the IDC,
Yeah.
racks set up. You can still sell, you always, but you it's a little passive in a sense. You get all the opportunities, but one day you can also get all bypassed. So that's why I have to say, I mean, it's still a good business, but by essence, it's still a real estate business in a sense. So you then at the end of the day, all your values will be coming from all those buildings and or those racks, those are hardware, right? It's not really a technology company in a
But
sense.
we may be overbuilding now because of DeepSeek maybe is more efficient. They're showing how to do it more efficiently. So we may need fewer data centers in the future. Just it's
That, yeah, that's a very good question, but that's also a very technology related question, meaning you need a lot of deep understanding or very close examination of technology stack before we can draw that conclusion. So far, what I get is DeepSeek has eliminated has kind of eliminated a lot of needs or make it much cheaper in some aspects, but on a lot of other aspects, actually make it much more expensive. So DeepSeek has invested heavily in a domain called reasoning, which is a part of a large language model, right? It saves a lot of effort or compute in training process, but it adds a lot of token consumption in reasoning. Yeah, in general, you still need more, even more. You make it more efficient, but you end up will need even more NVIDIA card or even more compute.
I see.
Yeah, so it's not a very straightforward answer to that. But in general, technology always goes through that cycle, right? It always that. So
Mhm.
you all of a sudden you need all those expense in infrastructure, but then software, like I mentioned, software will change, right? Which is DeepSeek, right? So DeepSeek is the software, so they uh, kind of got improved, so they will require less hardware. But on the other hand, they got much more usage, and then they require even more hardware because they have more use spaces, more activities. So that's kind of still within the rule, right? Yeah,
Okay,
it's
let me
it's.
ask you a broad question about generative AI then. Who's ahead, China or the US?
I'm sorry.
Who's ahead in generative AI, China or the US?
That's still US for sure.
Okay. Oh,
Mhm.
still US for sure. Why do you say that?
Uh, well, well,
I
it's
know
it's
it's
very
hard to
it's
generalize.
it's yeah. Um, well, China is still catching up, right? So if you look at this moment, maybe DeepSeek has a lot of advances, right? So in some aspects it shows some advantages, but very likely we're going to see a next breakthrough in Silicon Valley. So it's always like this, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, well, I think which is good, which is good. I don't think I mean it's always a good balance and a good and you put more pressure on the US side, right? So on the Silicon Valley side, and
Yeah,
I mean if you talk to Meta people, and they will invest, they actually will work longer hours, unfortunately, to come up with next better open source models, and
sure.
yeah, which is good. I mean,
That is
you need
good.
some competition. You don't want to be the solo player in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So do you think that this China-US split will be narrowed in the future, that will have more cooperation like we used to have, collaboration, cooperation? Then we have a splinter net now. What do you think? Where is it going to go in, say, 5 years from now?
that's a tough question. I don't have that
You may have to put
visibility.
on your Silicon Dragon hat to answer that question. You know? So,
Exactly.
so okay,
Yeah.
do we have yeah, that's great. Jonathan, terrific. I learned a lot. And yeah, the tech stack and all that. I think
Thank you.
it really is great that you have that technology background, but you've also learned how to take measured risk to be a
Yes,
venture capitalist as well. So now you're doing mostly deep tech, right? Out of Silicon Valley. Is that right?
exactly.
I see. Okay, well, good luck with that. And you're in a
Thank you.
you're in a good spot in Palo Alto. You must spend a lot of time at Stanford.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of good R&D coming out of Stanford all the time.
Yes. A lot from Berkeley also,
And
to be
Berkeley also,
fair.
but you have to go over there to the other side of the
Yeah,
bay.
yeah, yeah. A little bit more driving.
Or driving.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's great. So, look, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And please stay with us and check out our Silicon Dragon Ventures website for our next events. We've got a couple coming up that are really interesting. For instance, there's a new book on, well, it's not out yet. It's not out until the week that we have our event in New York City, Apple in China. And as you know, today that's a big topic, Apple in China. And so the writer is a Financial Times journalist who's covered Apple for many, many years. And that's going to be May 15th in New York City, but also virtually. So you can check it out on our website. And if you want to sign up for that, if you want to become a Silicon Dragon member, you might get one of these hats. Yeah, so let's give Jonathan a round of applause, everyone. And again, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, yeah, we'll have to have you back on because I want to learn more about what's in
Sure,
your
sure.
brain. I want to learn all that stuff.
Yes, it's
Okay,
a
all
very
right.
complex
Is
topic. Yeah,
it
I can spend
is.
more time.
It
Yes.
really is. Okay, thanks again. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.